Hi guys, you're here with Zoe Arthurs from Business Basics. So I'm consistently asked about what the 10 sort of key things are that you should consider when starting a successful business. So I've just given you some examples on this slide. So let's just go through them one by one. I will talk about them and then hopefully you can take from the PowerPoint and from the notes some key points when you're thinking about starting that all-important profitable business. So it's really important. You've got this great business idea. You're dreaming of lying on a beach in the sun. You've spent your retirement already. But the simple fact is that most businesses fail because they haven't actually tested the market. So just because you think the idea is fantastic and your friends and family may be backing that, and that's absolutely normal, it doesn't necessarily mean it is. Now, if you think about, and I keep referring to programs like The Apprentice as an example, they come up with this fantastic idea. They then go off to their focus group. Their focus group says something completely different because quite often when you're involved in a business, you can't see the wood for the trees. They haven't actually listened to what it is their consumer needs, and they've not identified their customer pain points. Now, I know I keep saying this, but it's so important that you identify what gap in the market it is that you hope to fill. So make sure before you wholeheartedly throw all your money at this fantastic business idea that you've tested the market, you've conducted things like focus groups, you've surveyed the market, you've researched your competitors, and you've tested it. You've done a soft launch because, again, quite often you think you've got this fabulous product, but when it actually comes down to it, you perhaps haven't thought of something that's really quite simple. So don't fall at the first hurdle. Do your research. We know it's the most boring thing to have to do in a business, but it is actually one of the most key factors that you need to consider before you move forward any further. So the second thing is just thinking about your ownership status. So most businesses will start off as sole traders and they go from there. But if you're confident that that's actually not for you, you may need to consider whether you go into a partnership or whether in fact you do actually turn your business from a sole trader into a private limited company. Now, if you do decide to move from one to the other, and quite often naturally as your business grows, you'll move from a sole trader or a partnership into a private limited company, your friends or your family or people that you say can own a share can actually own pieces of your business when you turn into being private. And that basically means that you then have shareholders. You're not floating on the stock exchange or anything quite as extravagant as a public limited company, but you are accountable to those shareholders. So it is worth considering the type of ownership before you sort of delve any deeper, if you like. Now, hopefully, and I'm sure this is absolutely going to happen, but once your business outgrows its private ownership, you may need to think about your public limited company. So this is where you go and you float on the stock exchange. And it's a good source of producing additional cash into the business, so additional capital by selling shares. But it is quite an expensive method to do that. So realistically, you wouldn't be looking at doing that until your business is of a substantial size. And one that you feel could sort of float, if you like, and people would want to buy shares for. Another thing you may want to consider, so if you've come up with this fantastic idea but you have found that there are a lot of other competitors, perhaps they've got a really good strong brand in the marketplace already, and perhaps yours may be competing against something that actually you're sort of quite concerned may not be quite as successful, and that's absolutely normal. You may want to have a look at franchising options. So if you take their brand, their operations and the way they do things, because obviously they've been tried and tested, you may find that actually you can make a really profitable business, still be a business owner, but work under a really well-known brand. So they've done all the legwork for you. So either way, making sure that you get that decision absolutely right is imperative to your business's success and ultimately its profitability. So do give it some thought and don't just sort of rush in. Now, we're going to talk a lot about branding in various tutorials, but when you're starting a company, your brand is of vital importance. It's not just a memorable logo, it is there as your complete package. It sells your story, as I've said previously and in previous tutorials. It sells your business ethics, your mission statement, but it's ultimately going to help you or your customers remember you as opposed to any other competitor out there. So it's something you need to consider and invest in from quite a high level. So it might be that you need to sort of go out and again research. So it's about you testing the market, because quite often when you've spent so much time lovingly designing your brand and coming up with a name and thinking it's absolutely fabulous, it says what it does on the tin, your friends and family are behind you 100%, actually this is something that you would need to take to a focus group and ask their opinion. And it's because they won't know anything about your business at that stage, and they'll be looking at it from a completely fresh set of eyes, which is really, really important. And then there are 5 fundamental aspects which I think you need to think about when you are thinking about your brand. So your logo, obviously it needs to tell your customer what you do. Your logo should also communicate your personality of your business, and it should represent your name, and it should be supported perhaps by a tagline. So, those 3 key words that are just going to really sell your business. And it should represent the target audience of your business. So in previous tutorials, I've spoken about things like, the colouring, the size of the font, the type of font that you use, and how if you were going for a lower level brand, pilot high, sell it cheap sort of business, you may want to avoid certain colours and something which sort of expels that sort of opulent feeling, because actually you're pricing yourself out of the market just by your brand image, and that's quite dangerous because it means that you're not actually meeting your customer needs. And that's why running a focus group on your branding is so important. But your logo should promise a level of quality to the customer. It shouldn't be anything sort of Mickey Mouse. It should be something which you've really considered fits your brand, your mission, as I say, your story and your ethics, and something that you feel will help sell your product or service ultimately to your end user. So don't sort of rush this stage. Please, please, please research it. Go on to the internet to check that trademarks and things haven't been logged against this particular brand name that you've got coming up, just so that you don't stumble against anything in the future. And ultimately, make sure that you can get a web domain with that. So employing the correct number cruncher, and by this I mean financial advisor to your business, is exceptionally important. And this aspect of business planning is quite often overlooked, because when you're a sole trader and when you're starting out, you're sort of someone who thinks that actually they know a lot, they could do it all, but actually, and if you have a look at the tutorial on accountancy ratios, this is where people can identify how efficient your business is going to be run. And it's also somewhere where you can identify savings that can be made really quite quickly within the early stages of the business, so that ultimately your profitability will hopefully increase based on the changes that you're going to make. And ultimately, don't forget, as a sole trader, you're going to be accountable to HMRC, so the Revenue and Customs, and you're going to have to make sure that your tax affairs are in order. And again, please don't just throw all your receipts in a carrier bag and think that you'll deal with that at year end, because I can assure you, actually, it doesn't work like that. So from the offset, it will make really good business sense for you to appoint an accountant, to have a meeting with them, to get to grips with their terminology. And if you're not sure once you leave them, you can review some of the other tutorials I've done on accountancy, just to help you understand exactly what it is that they're explaining to you, and you can get to grips with your business far quicker. Something else you need to consider is your office space. So obviously, this is a cost which a lot of businesses incur, but it is something that you could perhaps keep as low as possible. So if you don't need that office space or that shop space, start from home, start from your kitchen table, from your bedroom. It's where all the greatest businesses started. Apple started from their garage, and look at how huge they are now. Don't pay out for anything which is deemed unnecessary at this stage. You may think that you're going to need a fancy office to schmooze those all-important contracts, and actually that's not the case. So just consider the risk and the reward that you're going to get from paying out those high rental spaces. And equally, if you are considering a shop point location, have a look at your local high street, check the footfall in the area. It may be that actually, whilst you want to work in your local town, you want to support the local economy, that actually it's just not possible. So, take into consideration things like Pavement size, can you get a buggy, or are people going to cross the road at that point if you've got a particular shop front that you've got an eye on? Negotiate with the council on the tax and the rates. They will quite often have spare funds available where they need to entice local business owners in to the town so that they can actually discount these rates quite heavily before you actually sign on that dotted line. And something else you need to consider, really important, is computer systems. Now, Word and Excel is fantastic, but it doesn't do everything. So have a look at things like QuickBooks, have a look at some free software that's available that you're just able to make sure that you can maximise your efficiency and your profits. It may be that you need to create a customer relationship management system where you're able to mail shop. So have a look at things like MailChimp. They will be able to store and set things up like that for you so that you're able to stay in contact with your customers, but ultimately you're not having to pay the high costs of licensing fees in those all important early stages. There is a huge amount out there, and there's a huge amount of tutorials also on YouTube which will help you get to grips with some very basic software just to get you started. Now, all startups will run into some red tape along the way. It wouldn't be human nature if it didn't. But by researching your market, you can avoid the costly mistakes of running into them unexpectedly. So make sure you understand the regulations associated with any type of business that you're planning to operate. And I mean things like your tax regulations, your intellectual property law, perhaps employment legislation if you are employing people. Digital regulations, things like data protection, the Equality Act, and what insurance is necessary before you take that all-important step into the realms of starting up your business and running into profitability. And if you get all of these things right, ultimately the sales is the most important thing. And you are going to have to be involved in sales. So spend some time learning how to make sales confidently by using tutorials that are available online. Make sure your customer service and product knowledge is better than any of the other competitors out there, so that you are the one making the difference and you're closing the sales for your business. And make sure that you have every aspect of your customer needs covered, because every single sale is important as the last, and there is no such thing as, if you do create a bad sale, it's going to take 10 good sales for that one bad sale to be counteracted. So make sure at every point your customer is your key focus. So they were 10 key points that I think are really important when you're considering starting up a business. Know who your customer is, research your market. Do not, for goodness sake, plan any unnecessary expenditure, and just get to grips with making sure that you understand the financial implications and the regulations regarding setting up your business before you take the plunge. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and feel free to check out any of the other tutorials that I have put up. They're constantly evolving just to meet your requirements. So I'll see you soon. Bye for now.